So thank you for those of you who are able to join us. My name is Leslie Gomez, and with me today is Maureen Holland. Maureen and I are both attorneys out of a law firm in Philadelphia called Cozen O'Connor, and we work in a practice group that we call the Institutional Response Group. In terms of what we hope to do today, Maureen, if you'll click to the next slide, we'll start with introductions. We're small enough. And actually, let's hold the introduction until we stop recording. And then we'll come back and do folks' names and roles for that point. But we are small enough that we can step in and have that conversation. But we would like to walk through the purpose and the goals of the review. I know many of you may have just a little bit of information. Most of you have far less information about what we're doing, why we're here, why we're asking to meet with you at this incredibly busy time of the year. But to walk through what the County of Santa Clara has asked us to do, and specifically the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. Talk a little bit about our approach and context. I know that the idea of an audit or a review is something that can be anxiety inducing. We come at it from a very holistic approach as opposed to a narrow legalistic approach. And our goal really is to help raise the water level for everybody across the county, knowing that there are districts that are at varying levels of ability to faithfully carry out their Title IX and other state-related responsibilities. Maureen will talk about the specific steps in the review, what we've done, what we expect to do next, and then we'll wrap by really outlining what we're asking of districts and schools. Our goal is for this to be as light a lift for individuals as possible, and we've built into the process some specific benefits that we think will aid those who are choosing to participate. It's very clear to us and to those schools that are participating that this is a space where the county doesn't technically have enforcement authority, right? They are a body that you all live and work within. Certainly there's the Santa Clara County Office of Education, and then thinking about the Board of Supervisors. But the context and the goal of the review, as we understood it, was really to help improve and to ask the questions about what are we doing around Title IX compliance? How well are we serving our faculty, staff, and students? The PowerPoint that we're going to walk through is about 25 slides in length. It goes pretty quickly, and then we'll have time for questions. And we've found typically that we wrap in well under an hour, so that you'll get some of your time back this afternoon. In terms of the nature of the work, we've been asked to conduct a comprehensive assessment of the K-12 and post-secondary institutions, basically every educational institution within the County of Santa Clara, to look at their infrastructure, by which I mean, do we have a Title IX coordinator? Where do they sit? How do they coordinate with the various schools that might fall within their district? To look at written policies and procedures, those that are available on the website, training materials, and other aspects. And then ask questions about legal compliance in those written documents, as well as in just ensuring that there are sufficient resources in how we carry out the role. I will share with you, this is a very complex area of the law. Title IX, the Clery Act doesn't apply to you. That's one less you have to worry about. And the K-12 context, and then the Education Code, and we'll spend a little bit of time unpacking that context. The county has asked us, in addition to just looking at what we do at the schools and the districts, to also seek some feedback from your community. I know that you all serve a wide range of community members. Am I correct, Maureen, that this evening is an elementary district call primarily? And so that's, for you, it's even a sort of one step removed, in that these issues do come up in elementary schools, but in a very different way than when we see them in the high school and middle school session. And thinking through what that might look like differently for you, it's really more about engaging with parents than it might be engaging with students. And so talking through what that might look like is one of the questions we'll have from you in our process tonight. Who are the right people to engage with? Who might we work with in your school or your district to figure out how to do some community engagement? And Maureen will talk about that a little further. And then the last purpose or goal of the review is really for us to recommend areas for further development of a legally compliant and effective Title IX program. And where I want to turn next is to talk about just how we approach the work. We really think about this as I framed as a holistic, iterative review that is not based on solely legal principles. So for us, the core principles that we bring into our Title IX review or Title IX audit work, one would be humility, that recognize we don't know what we don't know about your school, about your district, about how things work in Santa Clara County. recognizing that it's also very different in each school and each district in a host of ways. We also don't know what we don't know about somebody else's experience. And so we're always open to learning about that. And as part of the questions we're asking today are what more information do you need? How can we help make this process more meaningful and useful to you? Second is just empathy, the recognition that we always want to flip the lens and think about those that we're serving. So not just looking at it from an administrator perspective, but also looking at it from a perspective of a student or a faculty member or a staff member who may be a complainant or a respondent. So how do we navigate that? Seeking to get to accountability, both accountability in process for the individual institutions, but also accountability in cases where we think there's behavior that might violate school code or Title IX in that context. And then ultimately, what I'm sure all of you know so well is collaboration. How are we sharing information between the schools and the district and between the districts across to think about what ways can we better provide resources? The framework for us is framed in the legal and regulatory framework. Maureen will talk to you about this in just a few moments, but we've taken the time to put together a very detailed overview of all of the laws that navigate or that you have to navigate in this area in a synthesized way. And that will be a takeaway, sort of a party favor, if you will, that we will release later this summer. We're holding off on releasing it because we're, of course, all anticipating Title IX regs may drop at some point in the next week to month to 3 months. There's really unclear when that's going to happen, but our context is an integration of the regulatory framework, the dynamics of trauma, of sexual and gender-based harassment and violence, of how it occurs within an educational institution, barriers to reporting that might exist. Part of the work that we do, both as prosecutors and then more recently in the past 12 years in this space that we have built this practice, is actually step in to do after-action reviews. And as part of the after-action review, we're asking the question, after there's been an incident, perhaps there's been an arrest of a student or a teacher, what are the things that we could or should have done? How can we take a look at what information did we have? What were our policies? What were our training? Where were our gaps? How could we have better prevented perhaps this type of an incident from occurring? And we do that both in the context of historical allegations of abuse, as well as things that may have happened last week. But spend a lot of our time thinking about the institutional structure and how we can build that structure in a way that is inclusive of and respectful of the dynamics of the issues. So how can I remove a barrier to reporting, whether it's by a student or by a peer administrator? And then lastly, the recognition that if there are 8 of you on this call, it's 8 different cultures, climates, history, resources, policies, procedures, personnel within your institution. So we try to think of all of those things together as we look at compliance and effective practices. We know that the context of elementary and secondary school is very, very different than what we may see in the post-secondary world. It's not entirely clear that the federal government has grasped that in terms of the Title IX regulations and the way that they have been approaching the issues. This is the everything model. And oh, by the way, K-12 schools, you can do it a little bit differently if you have to, but it truly doesn't, I think, take into account the understanding of the other things that are happening in very real time for you, mandatory reports on your camera, stepping into and thinking about intersecting with law enforcement, what's happening with your IAP process or other steps and hearings that you have to happen. How does this intersect with uniform complaint procedures? Your world moves so much more quickly, and it needs to move more quickly than what we're typically seeing in the Title IX context. But we also recognize the work that we're doing with a wide range of ages and developmental levels, different degrees of understanding of sexuality or other issues, communication abilities, and even understanding of impact of students' actions on others. The other piece that we spend time thinking about is that incredibly important mentoring relationship. We always said that you have to let students close enough in to build rapport and trust, but also keep them arm's length enough to remain professional and keep those boundaries. And so it's a challenging line to walk, but really thinking about what are the policies and practices in place that can help mitigate some of those risks and vulnerabilities, given the differentials in power and play. The other piece that we know from working with public school districts across the country, and we've previously worked with the Palo Alto Unified School District. We came in around 2018 or 19, I'm not sure the exact year, to help them rebuild their program and to investigate sort of the after-action review of 2 cases at the request of their board, as Palo Alto Unified School District was thinking about implementing a resolution agreement with the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. And so understanding what that might look like at the district level and at the school level, and recognizing how we have to keep that constant communication for the accountability mechanisms. And then just knowing at the end that resources and staffing are always a concern or a challenge or a unique gift of a public institution. I'm a proud graduate of the Frederick County High School in Maryland school system, and I know resources were always a challenge, even whatever that was 30 years ago. We give you just a couple of graphics to help think about the complexity. This is the recognition that what happens when you have an incident of sexual gender-based harassment and violence, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. You do not exist in a vacuum. You're part of a much broader ecosystem. And this is just to reflect that you may have law enforcement processes, child protective services processes. You may also have civil or regulatory actions happening. You may have OCR stepping in, for example, or civil lawsuits by families. So this is a graphic that I'm not going to spend the time talking about, but it's what we think about that goes into designing an effective institutional structure, infrastructure, and how that might play out. I prefer to look at it through this lens, which is that empathy flip the lens piece that we talked about in terms of caring for a complainant and a respondent, really wanting to make sure that we are offering supportive measures to both, being fair to both, having a prompt and equitable process for both. But ultimately, most of the conduct that you navigate and respond to won't result in separating the respondent from your institution. So thinking about how do we keep them connected to the process, connected to the institution, and thinking as we move through our process, care for both equally. And that's an important element in the equitable approach to these issues. The other term that I'd like to socialize is what we call the care compliance continuum. And it's really the recognition that compliance has become very much a dirty word. It's a check the box. We have to do it because we have to do it. We really prefer to think of compliance on the continuum of care, knowing that every compliance element we can tie back to a duty of care or a failure of a duty of care. And so we now have a law that requires us to do certain things because there are gaps in the past where those things were not happening routinely or consistently. And for us, that means effective practices incorporate an understanding of the impacts of trauma on individuals and on communities. And that means always balancing both consistent access to supportive measures, care, support, the supportive side or the system of belief, and then my neutral and impartial, fair and investigative process. And so our questions will ask both about what are we doing to investigate, but also what are we doing to support? And really thinking that the large part of Title IX work is actually on the left-hand column, where we're looking at supportive measures and support. And of course, all of this is happening in a rapidly changing world. Those of you who have been in education for some period of time will know and understand that since at least April 4th of 2011, there have been very significant legal changes that the term that has been used most frequently is a pendulum swing between our federal administrations, but I would go so far as to say it's really been more of a wrecking ball. And those of you who are directly involved in policy work or in institutional responses would remember the summer of 2020 with, I think, not a little bit of apprehension, knowing that this summer may look very similar. Part of what we'll be sharing, if there are new regs that come out during the course of our review, will be a model policy or a model template that includes the new regs and the areas in the new regs that you would then have the ability to take back to your solicitor or to your board to look at what a revision to policy might look like. And this is just a reflection that all of this is changing really rapidly. And I sort of feel like we keep trying to get stable footing on quicksand in this great national experiment. And the challenge in the great national experiment that the federal government and the state have been leading is that really the impacts are borne on our students, faculty, and staff who have to navigate processes, and on the administrators who are then trying to build those processes that you can carry out with integrity and fidelity.
So I'm going to share with you some of the steps that we've taken to date. One of the things that we've done is to take all of those legal requirements, whether they come from federal law or from state law, and compile them together in an integrated, synthesized way, really designed for community members like you, and even more broadly for the public, so that we can share the thinking around how those laws intersect, the evolution of those laws and other requirements, and flow through the process with attention to each of the legal requirements, but also, as Leslie framed, the care interwoven throughout those compliance requirements. So we have as Leslie said, a working document that we will keep updated, and especially look forward to updating when the new regulations are released. And part of what we will share with those schools that work with us through this process is that overview, so that you have that at your fingertips. Another critical step that we've taken to date is simply to identify the schools, that the educational institutions that are within Santa Clara County. And so altogether, there are 761 unique educational institutions within the county. We are making outreach to each of those institutions through folks like you in your roles, and seeking to understand the structures and the institutional responses related to Title IX, but also to get to know the people who are involved in each of those institutions. The third step is that we've cataloged and reviewed, or are in the process of reviewing, all of the publicly available information. So we know that one of the things that you all care about is, what does the front door look like? What are the public facing resources that are available online or that we have available to the public that talk about our commitments, both under the law and with respect to care? So looking at websites for notices of non-discrimination, identifying to the best of our ability the Title IX policies and procedures that exist, and what we can learn from looking at the public information from each institution. And then the next step that we'll take, and we have a draft of this, but we will be putting into place a survey. And really, there will be two surveys. The first will be designed to go specifically to personnel at the district level. So Title IX coordinators, sometimes superintendents or assistant superintendents. We really hope that the districts can come together and determine who is best positioned to complete that survey on behalf of the district, to explain in as much detail as the survey asks for the structure of the institutional response. And then there will be a separate survey that will go to each of the principals at the schools that really talks about how at the school level we intersect with the district around Title IX issues. Our immediate next steps are to disseminate that survey to all the institutions, again, those two surveys in those different groups, so that we can begin to understand the key information regarding the structure of the institutional response and the compliance elements. We will also review the written policies and procedures, and part of one of the steps that's missing in here is to send not just a survey, but we have a portal where people will be able to upload materials that we're not able to find on our own, so that we can review those materials for the legal compliance elements, and also looking at effective practices. So how, through the lens of our experience, how well are these materials suited to serving the interests that they're meant to serve? Third, to the extent possible, and we hope that you'll all engage with us in this effort, to conduct interviews of implementers. And so to understand from your perspectives as people who work in the system, and who interact with these issues on a very regular basis, where are you seeing gaps? How are you seeing that things are working? And where are there some opportunities for enhancements? And then as another immediate step, thinking about community feedback. So as Leslie shared, how might we best engage with your community, with the parents in your district, or maybe for some of the older students, their feedback about what are the issues that they're seeing most often, what are the things that they're concerned about, and how might the district be of better service in those areas for the communities. Finally, our plan is to integrate all of the available information and to give to each district and each school, if there are programs at the school level, a synthesis, a report back that says, here's what we observed, here's what we recommend based on what we've observed, and to identify those schools that may benefit from some more substantive intervention. We will develop a model policy, some communications templates, training materials, and other things that we hope will help as individuals are implementing Title IX. And then finally, providing training opportunities in step with the federal legal requirements and the state legal requirements, and providing opportunities to train the trainer. So hoping that individuals will take forth the information that we're able to provide and share it back with your communities. So what are the expectations of individual districts or of institutions? First, we hope that you will complete the survey regarding the structure, the resources, and the metrics. We hope that you will share with us the documents that we request, and we've identified a platform that hopefully makes it as easy as possible for folks to drag and drop different policies or other documents that you have. To identify the right administrators to participate in interviews with us. So we expect that those interviews would be about 1 hour each, and they would be designed to help us understand how your school is implementing Title IX, where there are gaps, where there may be challenges. And then finally, to disseminate and to help us share information with your community and encourage participation so that we can really help you learn what your community is perceiving and how they're intersecting with Title IX issues. This slide just gives a little overview of the kinds of things that we'll be asking about in the survey. And I should say, we will send you these slides afterwards, so you don't need to read each and everything, but it's really baseline information about the structure of the institutional response, how it's designed to work, reporting lines, issues that you're seeing, the written policies and procedures. So as designed, how does the system work? And then a little bit on implementation and how it's being brought to life. We want to share some of the benefits, some of the things that we hope that you will find helpful with this engagement. First is just the opportunity to have an external review with some observations and recommendations for improvement. Those of us who work in this space, and I've been working in the Title IX space now for about 10 years. Before that was with the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, as was Leslie. And one of the key things that helps me be better in this space is to have other colleagues with whom I can share issues that I'm wrangling with, and to be able to really get the benefit of another set of eyes, another brain, another person's thinking. And so in part, we hope that this both gives you access to other individuals who are in this space and to one another, to provide a channel for you to share information, to learn effective practices through the engagement and recommendations, having access to a written overview of that federal and state legal framework and the integration between the two, the opportunity for individual policy review with feedback about compliance elements, advice about the structure, the systems design, the communication, and access to that model policy, the template communications, training materials, and actual training that goes along with the legal requirements, and hopefully provides a meaningful opportunity to engage with some of these issues at a really critical time. When we know that the federal regulations are going to change, and if 2020 is any indication, there may be very short time frames in which we can all get up to speed. And so we look forward to that effort together. We want to end by sharing a little bit about our openness to hearing from you and pathways that you can share information or questions with us. First is we've created an email address, Santa Clara County Title IX Review at cozen.com. It's a little lengthy, but it's there for anyone, and we check it. A group of us are able to access the email box so that we can be responsive. And we welcome anyone to reach out to us that way. There will be the written survey disseminated to implementers, as we mentioned, but we also hope that we will prepare, and with your help, disseminate a survey to your community members to really understand their experiences and their perspectives. We also plan to have some open focus groups by district type, so elementary districts, unified districts, high school districts, and then some open office hours, likely by Zoom, so that we're as open and accessible to people as possible. And then the last few slides just show the timeline, and we're not going to read these to you, but we have a prepared timeline that we've shared along the way with the county. We've shared publicly, and the steps in the timeline are things that we wanted to make sure to share with you. So right now we're in this phase that began on February 1st, and we're reviewing and cataloging all of the information. We're having meetings like this. We're identifying the materials that are available to us online that we can gather without any effort on the part of the schools. We will next move in short order to this phase 3. And then finally, phase 4 and phase 5. We may move up the training. The reason why we have it as sort of a standalone deliverable is that we will be driven in part by what the federal regulations tell us in terms of timing. And so if we have an implementation date, as we did last time, of a few short months after the regulations are released, then we will work hard to meet that so that we can deliver training to you all.